Midlane Fundamentals, and I'm here today with Z Wolfie. Introduce yourself, Wolfie.
Hey, everybody. My name's Wolfie, and I am a Platinum 2 ADC main, but I'm here to help out Wolford for the mid lane.
So, today's main topic is on Midlane Fundamentals. So just hold on with me for a second while I get this set up. Okay, so Midlane Fundamentals. So the main thing that you should be doing every time you go into a game is making a game plan. First step to this is to create a basic game plan. Then you want to figure out your win condition, and from this you want to adapt to changes. The initial plan will only take into account about 1% of the things that will actually happen within your game. The other 99% comes from figuring out the new variables and adapting to them. Random things can happen in solo queue. We don't know how your lanes will play out. We don't know what your jungle will do. So moving on. When entering into a game, there are many variables to consider. The 1v1 trading patterns between you and your opponent, the ruins and the summoner spells, the jungler's class, their pathing and how strong they are early within the game, along with their overall identity. So a Lee Sin would have a much higher gank variable identity compared to a Karthus whose identity is mainly focused on counter ganking and farming. Decide on how you want to manipulate waves, exploit strengths, and cover weaknesses. An example is Ahri versus Kassadin. So let's say it's an Ahri Jarvan versus a Kassadin Sejuani.
Oh, Wolford, one moment.
Let's say the Ahri has a J4 and the Kassadin has a Sejuani. So starting out here, 1v1 trading patterns. Ahri is a ranged laner, meanwhile Kassadin is melee. Overall, Kassadin's early lane is very weak, so Ahri is able to get strong trades whenever Kassadin tries to last hit minions. Ruins and summoner spells, both these champions tend to take the same thing as flash DP. Jungle class, pathing and early strength. So Jarvans in general want to do 3 camps. Same with Sejuani's. However, Jarvan has a lot of early damage set up, and Sejuani is mainly just counter gank CC. And based on this, you have to decide how you want to manipulate waves. If you are the Ahri here, you want to either A, push it in so that way it's under the enemy's tower for a tower dive with your Jarvan, or B, freeze the wave on the Kassadin towards your tower in order to help get an overall advantage for the Jarvan to come in and gank. How you'd tend to achieve this freeze is by pushing the first 2 waves and letting the third wave bounce back, because that would be in time with right about when the Scuttle Crab would go down. So continuing on with creating a game plan. If the junglers are both farming junglers or won't affect the matchup, what you can think about is, what are the key item and level spikes? What are the amount of gold I should be backing on? Where should the wave be for trading? Can I join a scuttle fight? And what does the jungler need from me? So number 3, ask yourself how the side lanes will play. So speed. How are my top and bot lane trading? Can I influence this? Pressure. Which groups of people spike earlier? An example of this would be Jace versus Kayle. If you have the Jace in this situation, he is overall going to have a lot more pressure on Kayle as he's an earlier spiking champion. Kill threat / gank setup. Which side can roam to and positively affect? So let's say that you're in that Kayle Jace once again, but this time you have the Kayle. If you were to roam up there, there's a good chance that you get 1v2, so therefore the overall positive effect is much lower. What gank setup does that side have? Snowball potential. If I enter their lane, what are the chances that the lane will take over? So if it's a very aggressive top lane, if it's an Alawi versus Darius, you showing up to that lane could help push your Darius ahead and just fully take over that lane, as they both want to be aggressive, so any extra bodies within that lane will help push towards one side of the aggression. So a game plan example here. You're seeing that overall you're playing a Nivea against an enemy Yone. The Yone went Conqueror, which means that he wants to do extended trades. Meanwhile, you went Electrocute due to overall early burst damage. You have a Diana versus an Udyr. Udyr is a very strong early jungler and is able to get on the map a lot quicker than a Diana. And overall, a Diana has a much harder time clearing her jungle, therefore she gets thrown into the role of a farming jungler. Meanwhile, taking into account your summoner spells, it's an Ignite versus Ignite matchup, which means both sides want kill pressure. Meanwhile, in your top lane, you have high kill threat on the Tahm Kench, who has Ignite and Grasp into a Mundo with TP and Fleet. So overall, this Mundo is just going to seize waves as much as possible. At the end of the day, his overall fight potential, if you go up there, is very minimal. But if you look towards your bot lane, you got a very volatile lane with 200 years. What's his name? Aphelios. Versus Kai'Sa and a Maokai and a Set. So overall, this is a very volatile lane in the bot lane. So any kind of roams that you can do down there will help to affect them, as both Set and Maokai want to do heavy early trades, them both being melee overall. And as Nivea, with this Electrocute, you want to be getting done plays early. Okay. So win conditions and adapting. Now that we have learned what our game plan is, we have to look to information and how to adapt into it. So number one is the quality of trades in the side lanes. 2 is the objectives that have been taken or are currently available. The state of my jungler compared to the enemy jungler. The strength of a laner and their available mobility, which overall determines how vulnerable they would be to you affecting their lane. Scaling helps determine risk management and itemization that is currently on the board. So here we have an example as the Fizz. You can see that the top lane matchup, your Tryndamere overall has a large component item and boots. Meanwhile, the enemy top laner is only at tier 1 boots and a ruby crystal. So overall, they are very susceptible to ganks. Your jungler is essentially neutral, both junglers being around the same item spikes. However, there is a slight farm advantage on your jungler. Though when you look down to bot lane, you have a tier on the enemy Ezreal, and you have a Shard of True Ice on the enemy support against a Noon Quiver and a Banshee, or not Banshees. Bandle Glass Mirror, yeah, new items. So overall, out of these lanes, While top lane is a good one to affect, bot lane is very susceptible to any influence you can put to them, as there is a high spike items. As your lane is slightly behind, this can also help swing that. But overall, affecting this lane as early as possible will help you, along with the easy stacks on your Dark Seal. So losing gracefully. This is a subject that lots of people seem to have troubles with overall, because everyone has the carry mindset mentality in solo queue, and this will actually help you win more games than you think it will, as these help you keep away from the situations where, let's say, your top laner is having 10 kills currently, and you're 0-3, right? If you start to do these steps, you can make it so that top laner can continue on their lead, while you essentially get carried. So starting it off, you don't have to always be the carry in your games. If you identify your winning side, play towards it. How do you know when to lose gracefully? This tends to happen when you have a clearly winning side, that if your team plays around it and keeping them ahead, they can help take over the game. You can usually analyze this by the 10-minute mark. So what's my job when losing gracefully? Number one is stay healthy. If you're healthy overall, that means the enemy champions can't farm you, which doesn't put them ahead in gold, which helps keep you essentially keeping neutral. Give pressure when needs be. This is a big one. Lots of people want to farm their waves. But if you have 3 people in your lane, maybe farming your wave is not the best thing you can possibly do. Maybe back off, lose that 40, 50 gold, and in turn you won't be getting 40 gold but giving up 300. Number 3, keeping strong side warded to help prevent ganks. So if your strong side, once again, is your top laner, you want to keep your wards more towards the top side of the map, put them just over the wall towards the buff on top side, throw them into pixel brush. Essentially make it so if anybody tries to go up and gank that top laner, they'll be spotted out on your ward. Keep on the same side of lane as your jungler. So if your jungler is clearing top side, you want to be on the top side of the lane, so that way if a fight were to break out between you and your mid laner, or somebody else comes into your lane, you have a way out, because you can always move towards your jungler. And by moving towards your jungler, you are essentially keeping yourself safer, because it will become a 2v2 or a 2v1 if they end up following hard enough. Like I said before, give CS if in danger. You don't need to be trying to last hit CS in the middle of 3 people. Give tower if need be. So this is one that lots of people have some problems with. It's like, my tower is very important. I need to keep my tower up in order to help protect us. But if your tower is currently sitting at a 3rd health, you are most likely going to get dove. So the enemy team gets 300 gold plus the tower anyways. So by giving the tower, you help pull away that gold, plus you have the time on the map available for stopping them getting a 2nd or a 3rd one. And let the winning side last hit minions. This essentially helps turn it into a pseudo funnel. So if the winning side starts to come towards your lane, and let's say you're down 30 CS, let them last hit those minions, because having one person who is very strong is better than having 2 people who are mediocre or below in strength. because we've all had those games where the enemy Jax gets 13 kills, and all of a sudden, even though the rest of your lanes are doing really well, that Jax having 13 kills and essentially being up a couple levels can 1v5 your team. So what you are trying to do in this situation is to essentially help force that onto that winning side. Mid to late game. Mid to late game is when this all starts to fall apart, because people in general don't know what's going on, and you get a lot of stall for time. So the later the game goes, the more things you have to take into factor as options that may be decreased. What should be taken into consideration is the strength of each champion respectively, the level of engage / escape, how each champion wants to fight, flash cooldowns, itemization, and durability. So what we mean by strength of each champion respectively. This is essentially late game, a Renekton is not as strong as a Kayle, right? If you get a level 16 Renekton and you get a level 16 Kayle and put them in a 1v1, the Kayle is probably going to win that, as long as you can keep distance. So this is what we mean by strength of each champion. The level of engage / escape. If you have a Leona, a Nautilus, or even as mid laners, if you're playing Malzahar, Lissandra, Galio, you have a decent level of engage. But the second part of this is the more crucial part, is the level of escape of the enemy team. So if the enemy team has an Udyr, unless you can get a lot of hard CC on him, he's probably going to run away from you. He can get a lot of distance really fast, so hard CC is important on him. Tristana, she has a CC buffer. So that is something that you have to take into consideration when engaging on a champion like that, is can they buffer out of my CC and essentially make it worthless. How each champion wants to fight. So Fiora, classic champion, wants to 1v1 in a side lane, or 1v2 in a side lane. Not a team fight champion. A mid lane example is Rumble. Rumble wants team fights. Rumble wants to get a nice 5-man ulti, start burning the enemy team, and taking them out. But he doesn't want to be off in a side lane, or even 1v1ing in mid lane essentially, just burning people. He wants to get that large area of effect team damage in order to be effective. Flash cooldowns. Flash is a very important summoner spell in the game, and everyone essentially knows this because pretty much every champion takes it who doesn't have a better option otherwise. Flash can make engages essentially worthless. So keeping track of enemy flash cooldowns will help overall determine how much you can pick them, how fights will go. So if you're engaging as a Galio onto an Annie, if the Annie has flash, she's probably just going to flash your taunt, and therefore that would be a unsuccessful engage. But if you know the Annie's flash cooldowns down, you can use a lot more abilities. You can E to get in, and then go into your taunt, or you can taunt and then save some time and wind up for your E, because you know she can't get out. That's why keeping track of flash cooldowns is important. Itemization. There's many items in the games now that massively change how effective these champions are. Gale Force is a big one, giving ADCs a dash of, even though it's micro, helps them dodge skill shots, or even worse, get on top of your squishy carries. QSS. if you're looking to layer CC, QSS can ruin your day because they can just buffer the 1 CC and just walk away. Zonias and alternatively stopwatch. If you're a burst damage champion like a LeBlanc, a Zed, a Talon, you need to know these cooldowns for Zonias. Because if they use Zonias 2 minutes ago, you can bet it's back up. So you don't want to use your full Talon combo to have them just Zonias all your damage. And finally, durability. Essentially, how tanky or how much survivability do these champions have? An add-on to this factor is, do they have an enchanter? Because an enchanter essentially is adding durability to any champion that they can get close to, as their shield helps increase their effective health pool. And finally, review. In your games coming up, create a game plan and think about win conditions. Ask yourself how the side lanes are trading, what itemization is happening within the game, where do these champions want to fight, and go over your VODs with a friend. If you can get a second opinion on your decision making, it will greatly help you to improve overall with it. Because if you have a very neutral game, let's say, where it's like, okay, I lost, but we were essentially going even the entire time. There's always improvements in your decision making that you could do there, like wasting time before backings, or not necessarily rotating to a certain position before something happens. And finally, be mindful that you could have made the right decision, it was just poorly executed. So let's say you made a call for Baron. Overall, it would have been a 4v5, but they get a smite steal. Overall, that was probably a good decision to make. But what could you have done to make that more effective? Could you have CC'd the enemy jungle to keep them out of the pit? Could you have essentially zone controlled? Let's say you're playing an Orianna. Could you have put your ball on the opposite side so that way if they try to get near a pit, you can just ult them, chunk them, so that way they will essentially have to back and give you the Baron for free. So this transitions us onto our next topic, how to do effective roams. So overall, an effective roam takes into consideration all of these strategies that you're seeing with your overall game plan, but with the add-on that you have to start predicting when to do it. So we're going to switch over to that real quick. Anything to add, Wolfie?
So far, we have a good setup. It is important to note that as a mid laner, you are one of the most important roles in the game due to your ability to affect either side of the map due to your proximity to both of them. So roaming is an excellent way to get the game moving towards in your favor of your team. So that's what we're going to try to go on right now.
Yep. So pulled up right now, this is a website called LOL Tactics, and there's a nice little smiley face. So once again, we're gonna just pull up the standard portraits. Just be mindful that these portraits haven't been updated in a couple years. So when if you start to see a face that looks unfamiliar, just let me know in chat. And see what we can do. So pretty standard teams. So you're playing Caston, and as all Castons know, you want to be able to scale up into the late game. You have a Kled, you have a Lee Sin, you have a Jin, and a Karma bot lane into Maokai, Jinx, Ari, Olaf, and Kale. Kale being the only old poster. So what you can immediately tell from this is Kled, realistically, should win this matchup. This matchup should be even. And these two are, since Olaf is starting on blue, he wants to path down. And he'll be looking to affect the game through here or here. And this is something that you can tell based on when people get to lane. So if bot lane shows early, you can easily tell that Olaf probably started on the opposite side of the map, along with if top lane shows late, same thing. So you have a Lee Sin, so same thing. He wants to just path through, and then he'll be looking to affect either top lane or you. Okay, so getting that through. Early levels, as we discussed earlier, Ari has an overall advantage on you, you being melee, and this pretty much carries through for every single melee champion, whether it be Yone, Yasuo, Fizz, Katarina, and the whole slew of characters there. Your overall advantage is that if you can get on her, which this is essentially at 6, you will do more damage in general to her. So because you have these two super effective overall junglers, you can essentially assume that they're both going to be looking to affect your lane. So your main goal is to try and freeze the wave at about this line. The reason you want to freeze it at this line is, as you can see here, Olaf would either have to run through your wave into you, or he'd have to run around. But if he's running around, you can see him once he gets past this point. Sorry about the arrows, they're not working very well. There, this should fix it. You'd have to go past this line. In which case, you can just skedaddle out of this whole thing. But let's say you didn't come up with your game plan overall. If you're just fighting in the middle, you can just walk up to you, right? And this is where Ari wants to keep the wave. Ari wants to keep it here or here, because she wants you to have to move up beyond that line, because once you move beyond that line, you have free engagement range. You'll essentially have to, 1, start walking away, and 2, blow a flash. So they just got a summoner spell off of nothing. But because you have the Lee Sin here, if you are keeping the wave even slightly towards your side, you can essentially bait for a counter gank. because you've thought about this ahead of time, you know, hey, I'm gonna play on this side of the lane, and naturally, your enemy's gonna want to play on the opposite side. So you are essentially both standing on your jungler side. So because you're standing on your jungler side, if Olaf comes in first, you can just go out this way. Right? And then you'd be with your Lee Sin. If Lee Sin comes in first, Ahri's going to have to back up, which essentially gives you pressure. So overall, this is a positive move for you, and neutral at best for Ahri. Like keeping to this side. Because all Ahri can do here is... the delete function is just too strong. All Ahri can do here is poke you. So if you're just dodging her poke, because you essentially have a minion wave in front of you, she can't hit a charm. So she's going to have to do something really funky in order to hit you with skill shots. So moving on from this, affecting side lanes. So because you have a Kled here, Kled wants to fight this Kayle as much as possible. So if you, at any point, you see the Kayle start to move at this, past this line, you should be looking to roam post 6. Because even if this is warded, by the time you get to this point, that's her vision range. By the time she actually notices, you're essentially on it. Because overall, and you guys have all experienced this, nobody's looking at the map properly. So this is essentially the frame buffer that you're working with for you appearing on her minimap. So because susceptibility to ganks, you are post 6, you can go up there. Kled has a soft CC with his ult and a hard CC with his pull. So with you going up there, Kled's intention is to pull the Kayle. And if he can get that pull off, it's essentially free. Because you can tower dive, you can do whatever you have to in order to help secure that kill, thus putting the Kayle behind and getting rid of one of their scaling options, which is what we talked about earlier. Is the better the scaling, the more risky of plays that you can make. So, because you essentially want to prevent them from scaling. Anything to add to that, Wolfie?
I believe you've got most of it down. You do really much want to affect the most volatile lane, which is the Kled and Kayle. And if Kayle's mismanaging this wave at all, it's so easy to gank a Kayle who is like pre-11, even pre-16, although pre-16 is kind of crazy, because she very much lacks the ability to get away from a Kled who has 2 dashes onto her. And you having the ability to have flash on your ultimate makes it very much easy for you to chase down this Kayle as she attempts to run back through the lane. So if she pushes up, you can easily go on to that. As for early laning, you are most definitely going to be behind due to the fact that Ahri can just simply auto attack you. So if you can get some minions, whatever, now and then, but it's always important to stay healthy and never to incite Olaf to gank you. Because if you're anywhere around this middle lane, Olaf is just so easily gonna run you down and murder you before you get to tower. Especially since Ahri has some setup on her with her charm. And you as a Kassadin, well, as a Kassadin, you have basically nothing early levels. You have one small magic shield to maybe block some of Ahri's damage, but if you incite a gank from a jungler, it's not going well at all. And as a Kassadin, you just want to scale. So you want to play the early game is everything for you. And if you can get a kill on a side lane, to say top lane, it will be very helpful for trying to scale and snowball your champion into becoming super relevant. On the flip side, we haven't talked about bot lane yet. And this bot lane, your bot lane is more poke oriented than actual like engage. So they're Jinx and Maokai. Maokai has the ability to flash engage whenever he wants. You can't really get that out of a Karma. So if you were ever gonna look towards bot side, you'd want to look to see if Lee Sin was gonna roam down bot, and if he's pathing towards bot side, and it kind of looks like this Jinx and Maokai are a little too far up. Okay, that's not working. And if this Jinx and Maokai are a little too far up, it might be a great opportunity to do a 5-man gank, 4-man gank onto this Jinx and Maokai. Mainly because like having your bot lane ahead is always a good thing, especially since AD carry, the ahead AD carry is always more useful than the behind AD carry, because AD carries don't really provide much other than just pure damage. So getting a Jhin ahead will be also very nice. So it's mainly affecting these side lanes, which will get you this win as the Kassadin versus Ahri matchup. And roaming with your jungler is very important to getting these wins. Other than that, yep.
Very, very well spoken. And since we didn't actually get any questions this week, I'll give a second for the chat if they have any questions within this. Overall, I believe that can wrap it up right there. Give you a moment. Nope. Okay. So thank you, Wolfie, for coming on.
No problem.
Next week, same time, 8 p.m. on Sunday, we will be doing ADC, Learning League Together, episode 3.
With me again. Yay.
With Wolfie. Thank you, everyone, for coming out.
Hope to see you again next week.
Yep. Bye.